Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar about the B2B invoicing mandate in Germany. We have people joining us today, not only from Germany, but also from different countries across the world, representing global companies with business in Germany. Therefore, the webinar will be held in English. My name is Johanna Römer. I'm a Customer Success Manager at Tradeshift and your host today. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our speakers that we have on the agenda and what we have on the agenda. We will start with the current e-invoicing landscape, which will be covered by our compliance product manager, Carina Festinese. Her background is in law, specialized in international tax compliance and VAT. She will also introduce the details of the German mandate before passing it over to our senior solution consultant, Sam Purchase, who has worked in European P2P roles across procurement and finance departments for over 20 years. He will take a look, he will talk about the different formats, our solution for the mandate, and we'll also do a live demo in the Tradeshift platform. At the end, we will take some questions. So if you would like to ask us something, please use the Q&A section, which you will find at the bottom of your Zoom window. And speaking of questions, we also have one question for you. What would you like to learn next in our compliance webinars? For your answers, please take a minute to fill in a short questionnaire, which will pop up at the end when we close the webinar and you leave. Thank you very much for that. And now enough from my side. Carina, the digital floor is yours.
Thanks, Johanna, and welcome everyone to the webinar. So I will start today with an overview of the current invoicing compliance landscape. And later on, we will dive into the German mandate. So we have two main regulatory models. The post-audit model, where the invoices are raised by the companies independently, and the tax authorities will have only access to the records later. It could be months or years, depending on the country. And on the other hand, we have clearance models where the invoices are sent to the tax authorities for clearance or validation. And in this way, they will have access to the data in real time. In the post-audit model, the invoices are not required to be submitted to the tax authorities. They will access to the record later, as I said before. And this is the traditional system that is used in many countries. It is important to have in mind that the documents will need to fulfill certain requirements that will be checked by the tax authorities during the audits, such as the authenticity of the documents, their integrity, legibility, if it's archived by the mandatory period, and if it's compliant with the law requirements. In the clearance model, the invoices will need to be sent to the tax authorities for validation. This system will help reduce tax fraud and will make sure that the tax authorities have more accurate tax collection. We have two different types. We have a pre-clearance model where the invoices are sent to the tax authorities right before they're issued. And then we have post-clearance model where the invoices are sent to the tax authorities immediately after they're issued. So what's the global trend? We are seeing how countries are shifting towards clearance models. And this is because the tax authorities need more visibility and accuracy in the tax collection. This will really help to reduce the VAT gap and close and help with the VAT fraud. That's why we're expecting to see many countries adopting any kind of continued transaction control models, such as clearance or real-time reporting by the year 2030. So what's been the evolution of the invoicing? In the past, we are seeing a very limited adoption of invoicing. It was focusing mainly on B2G transactions, very paper-based. The archiving was also paper-based. The data formats were varied and mixed and very error prone, and focusing on basic compliance. However, looking at the future, we are seeing invoicing mandates being implemented in many countries. Also, it is expanding to B2B transactions. We are seeing now fully electronic processes, fully archiving processes. And the data formats are more standardized now, like, for example, the use of the PEPL network for document transmissions. And this is, of course, with the objective of the tax authorities having access to the data in real time. So one of the major challenges that the tax authorities are facing now in the EU is the VAT gap. So last year, the VAT gap report was showing that in the year 2020, the VAT gap was 99 billion euros that the tax authorities are missing to collect. 1 year later, in 2021, we are seeing that the VAT gap is 61 billion. Seeing these numbers, we can understand that the implementations of CTC control systems are helping to reduce the VAT gap. As a result of what I was just saying before, the EU is promoting a major initiative to modernize the EU VAT system, digitalize the economy, and help cross-border trade within the EU. This is the VAT in the Digital Age, or VIDA. This VIDA program is based on 3 pillars that I will discuss soon. And this proposal is still under negotiation after Estonia has rejected the second pillar. And the next round of discussions will be next month, the 7th of November. So we will keep an eye on it and hopefully it can be unblocked. As I was saying before, the VIDA proposal is based on 3 pillars. The first one is focusing on making real-time reporting and invoicing mandatory across the EU. The second pillar is focusing on platform economy rules, making sure that the digital platforms are responsible for collecting and reporting VAT. The third pillar is focusing on making a single EU VAT registration. This will simplify the VAT registration across the EU and expand the existing one-stop shop system. Here we can see an overview of different countries adopting different systems. The first one on the left, we have the traditional post-audit model, and some countries under this model are also implementing e-invoicing mandates, such as Germany. Others are also using standardized systems like PEPL for document transmission. We can see other countries implementing real-time reporting systems, such as Hungary. And then countries already implementing clearance model, where the invoices will need to be validated by the tax authorities, such as Brazil or Romania. Other countries are using a centralized model, where the invoices are issued through the tax authorities, such as Italy. And other countries are implementing an interoperability model, where it's combining reporting, clearance, and interoperability, such as France, where we just have been registered as an official BDP. So what's the difference between a CTC and a non-CTC invoicing mandate? When we talk about a CTC invoicing mandate, we're talking about clearance. The invoices must be sent to the tax authorities for validation, and they will have access to the data in real time or almost real time. This is the case of Italy, India, or Malaysia. In a non-CTC invoicing model, the invoices don't need to be sent to the tax authorities for clearance. They will access to the records later, and this is following the classic post-audit model. This is the case of Germany now and Australia. Okay, so let's dive into the mandate in Germany. We will discuss some key points of the mandate that is coming. So this mandate is covering domestic B2B transactions between companies established in Germany or in areas specified by the law. If one of the parties is not located in Germany, they don't have to raise an e-invoice. Paper invoices can still be issued, but only if the recipient consents to their use. It is important to have in mind that this mandate is also covering small business owners, even if they're only engaging in tax-exempt transactions. The e-invoices must be transmitted electronically. Can be via email, electronic interface, or customer portal. The companies can use service providers, but they are responsible for ensuring that these providers adhere to the law. Some important points to keep in mind. There are some exceptions to this mandate, like intra-community transactions and simplified invoices below 250 euros are excluded. The e-invoice format must align with the European standard, the EN 16931. The invoice must be authentic, unaltered, and machine readable. Regarding archiving, it is important to keep in mind that the companies are required to retain the structured part of the invoice in its original format because they will be checked by the tax authorities during the audits. Our solution will be an inbound connection to an email inbox that supports the required documents. All right, so what's the timeline for this mandate? From January next year, the mandate will start and all the companies must be capable of receiving e-invoices. The issuing of e-invoices is still voluntary. 2 years later, by 2027, the mandate will be covering all companies with annual revenue over 800,000 euros. It is important that by that time, the companies are able to issue and receive invoices that complies with the European standard. By January 2028, the mandate will extend to all business in Germany, and formats like PDF sent via email will not be considered compliant invoices anymore. I will now pass it over to my colleague Sam to talk about the document format.
Thanks, Karina. And I think just while I'm loading my screen up, I think that last point's a pretty dramatic statement that by 2028, PDFs won't be accepted as a valid format. And I think that's something to really focus people's minds on what we're doing. So I'm going to have a little chat and we're going to have a look at what these document formats are. EN 1693, you may have heard it. We also want you to really understand what's going on in terms of that format. Then we'll have a little bit of a demo, talk through the solution so you get an idea, and then we'll just bring it back to the bigger picture of how this all fits within Tradeshift. So if we go through and have a look, EN 16931, you may hear this term a lot, and we're going to try and simplify it, but the text on the screen is a lot of the text actually from the actual definition. And I think one of the key things is understanding the format of a core and a CUIS, which is a core invoice usage specification. So the core really is about the essential elements of an invoice, and it provides a syntax independent framework. So what that really means is the core defines what it is, and really we can see that there's two format types, two syntaxes that really satisfy this, and these are UBL, which is Universal Business Language, and CII, which is cross-industry invoice formats. So that's kind of giving us our core, and that word's quite easy to understand. We also have the core invoice usage specification, which we talked about, and really each EU member state can define its own CIUS. And really this allows specific areas to be brought in that you may need for a local regulation, etc., etc. We've got examples of those. So Fattura PA in Italy already. So Italy have been running this with their SDI for a while, but also in the future as well, we've got things like Facture X, which is linked to French PDP model coming up in the future. So really we can see countries are using this CIUS to make those subtle tweaks that they need for those things. And I'm a great fan of trying to simplify things, and a good way from, I think, of understanding it is if we bring it back to cars and automotive, the core is your Golf, the CIUS is your Golf GTI. So it's still a Golf, but might have better seats in and something else put in, etc., on top. And it's that additional flavor on top. Now, if we think about this specifically in Germany, and you may have heard some of these phrases going about, I think it's important you understand what these formats are. So in Germany, you have something called Extraikon, and this is, again, it's a standardized XML format, and that satisfies what we've just been talking about. So the EN16931, it satisfies that criteria. And again, the two syntaxes that are permitted for this are UBL and CII. We're actually going to demo UBL a little bit later, so it's a good example for you to see something like that. Then we've also got Zugford, and Zugford looks, to all intents and purposes, if you just open it, it looks like a PDF. And it's a PDF reaching a certain ISO standard of PDFs. But actually, when you look inside, there's an embedded XML file. So it has the data embedded inside the PDF. So it's important to understand that there's these two formats here. But also, if you look at how the legislation's coming in, there are phases where you can have another agreement on formats between buyers and suppliers as well. So as it evolves, we will really be seeing that we may see more adoption, for example, of Extraikon UBL may be the format that gets used the most. But the important thing is that Tradeshift's in a position that we can support all these formats and actually take some of this headache away. Now, one of the big things with the legislation being brought in Germany is it doesn't actually really specify how the document gets there. So if we look, we're saying it has to be an e-invoice, it has to meet those standards, and it has to be brought in on certain dates. This means things like PEPL, which is already being used generally in the government type space. And if you're an accredited PEPL authority, this could be a transition method. This could be a way of, and PEPL gets called a 4-point model. So it's a PEPL provider sends to a PEPL provider. That can be a way of the documents getting in between. However, common consensus is that probably the solution that will get adopted by most businesses, and this may just be initially, is via email. So email is used to send these documents in that specific format. So that's really the solution that we'll be talking through today. However, again, as these things evolve, I think it's important to understand that Tradeshift is a platform that doesn't just need to rely on someone emailing and invoicing. And we've got that flexibility to have those other transition methods as we see these things adopt and evolve. So let's have a little chat and an overview of what the solution looks like before we go in and demonstrate it. And it's really quite simple as a sort of general flow. So sellers have their Extraikon and they have their Zugford, and they can send those in via email in that format. Now, importantly, as these emails come in, these emails get validated against something called the business firewall. So in Tradeshift, what we want to do is we want to make sure that documents have all of the information that they need to have. So it's really about checking what documents you need for a legal perspective, but also this is an opportunity for businesses to try and keep that document really enriched with the information that you need. So one of the trends we have seen a lot is you may have developed business processes over the last 10, 20 years, and you require certain bits of information. So it could be freight charges, it could be PO line numbers, etc., etc. If you look at what you need to actually send as EN16931, and that you may find that some of that information ends up getting removed. And what we don't want is that to affect your business processes going forward. So the business firewall is a good way of checking that. And one of the important things is we have a flow that sellers can enrich the invoice. So if something's wrong, if some data is missing, we have a route that suppliers can add that information in and the document gets sent back. So what we're really using this as a way of keeping those business processes, getting all those benefits of e-invoicing. So we've now got good data, we've got line level data, it's coming in straight away, but also making sure that it's still working for those rules that you need as a business for that automation. And once this happened, if everything's there, we're doing the invoice and approval and payment step, whether that be within Tradeshift or in an external platform. Now, the eagle-eyed of you may notice that first invoice. So we have a specific process for the first time a supplier sends an invoice in, and this is really one of the things that we can use to drive relationships and getting your suppliers to work on Tradeshift. And there's lots of benefits for buyers and suppliers working on there. And the way this works is you have this email inbox that we were talking about. The invoice arrives, and Tradeshift is based on apps, so it arrives in something called Relationship Manager. That is used to work out that relationship, say that this invoice is from this supplier, but also downstream, it will also say that, let's just say you got SAP, that this supplier is vendor number 852641. Then once this relationship is set up, again, it allows to do that flow, but importantly, we use it as a mechanism to invite suppliers onto Tradeshift so that not only can they enrich the documents, but it allows the supplier now to see the status of the documents, collaborate real time, and actually you're getting even more benefits out of that e-invoice. So yes, legislation has been brought in and we all have to comply with it, but that doesn't mean we can take advantage of really what that legislation is bringing in to really enhance our business processes. And really, finally, I think the important thing is not only are we thinking about those from that buyer's perspective, but also there's that supplier's perspective of and there's the ability of having middleware. So your system may not automatically, as a supplier, create a UBL. And what we have is around our network is we have a middleware capability where we can translate that into the correct message. So you could be sending something out in an iDoc and we can convert it into a UBL, which then means it's compliant to that standard that we were talking about, but also when it moves into ERP systems, so could be a buyer on Tradeshift, they're able to process that document quickly and efficiently. But that's enough talking. I think it's best to see these things in action. So let's go through and let's have a look. And we're going to start with something very exciting, and I'm going to send an email. So we are sending that email to this specific email box, and you can see we have a UBL connected. We're going to send that email in, and then we'll watch how those emails can get processed going forward. Now, I don't want to scare people too much, but I think it's important you understand, and we just have a bit of a view of what a UBL looks like. So this is what was attached in the email. So this is the actual document, and you can see there's the elements there. So what we are seeing is how that UBL document was attached and then gets sent into the system. So now we're in Tradeshift. So we're going to have a look at what happens to those invoices when they get emailed in. Now, some of you on the call may have never seen Tradeshift before or used the platform. We've also got some existing customers, but I just want to spend a second explaining what we're seeing. So this is Tradeshift. Tradeshift's a cloud network, a cloud product, and there's only one Tradeshift, and that single Tradeshift can be accessed by buyers and suppliers, and really based on their roles and what they're doing, they have different apps. So we talk about those apps, and it's really those apps that can drive what they're doing. But as you'll see, there's some real benefits of us as a buyer and a supplier working on the same platform, especially when we're doing e-invoicing. So here in Relationship Manager, we can already see some of the supplier documents that have come in. So if we just have a look at this supplier here, VPAC GmbH, we can see that they're sending those documents in, they're linked to our accounting system ID, and they're active. So what has happened for that supplier is we've invited them to the Tradeshift network, they've joined, and we'll do some more interaction between the buyer and supplier later on in the demonstration. What's also important to realize and understand is also we may have suppliers that we've invited, but they haven't joined yet. So if we have a look here, this supplier is what we would call passive. So we've invited him to be onto Tradeshift network, but they haven't joined yet. But we're still able to process those documents. So if I went and had a look, and I actually sent a UBO invoice in just earlier this morning, we can see that we had that Eclecton invoice sent in. We've generated a nice PDF off of all that data that you saw up on the screen, so you can read it. Actually, this one's got an embedded document inside as well, so we can see that PDF. And actually that document has been processed and flowed straight into Tradeshift. In my demo environment, I'm doing the workflow in the platform. If not, it would get sent to your workflow product where you can do your matching and then finally do that payment. So you can see how all that code is now put into a system and sent across automatically. And if we go back to Relationship Manager, we can have a look to see that actually we had some invoices come in today. So we can see that we had this one at 223. And really what we can see is now we've had that invoice sent in. We've got that identifier. We've pulled out all of these elements here, so you can use these elements to identify that supplier. What we can then do is have a look to see if they are already on Tradeshift. They're not, so they're not already on the network. And we can use this as a process to now invite that supplier to Tradeshift automatically. So we'll just pop an email address in here. And then we can go through the rest of the process. So as we go through, as I mentioned before, one of the key things you need to know is what that accounting system ID is. And really what we're going to do is invite the company to come in and connect and work with us on Tradeshift, but also what we want to do is process that document. So we're going to do that. That connection is now being created in the background, and then that supplier will get invited onto Tradeshift so we can have a look to do that. Now, if we go back and we remember our flow, so we had invoices coming in, we checked them. So let's have a look at what happens with an invoice that's not perfect and it's not checked. It's failed some kind of thing. So this is really where we can go across and have a look at that supplier view. So we can look at that enrichment process. So if we now have a look, I'm now logged in as this supplier. I would have got a notification about this, etc., etc. But I also have a big thing saying I've got an open task. So if we go in and have a look at what we call Scan.io. So Scan.io is our application. We talked about those apps where you can interact with documents. We can see that this invoice has actually been sent to the supplier for what we call enrichment. So this is where we've said to the supplier, there's something wrong. Can you have a look at this invoice? And we've put a fairly simple example one up here, but actually what you can see is this invoice has come in. It's actually a duplicate invoice number. And what we want to do is actually for them to resolve that issue. So they could change the data, they could update it, etc., and we could process it on. But remember, we were talking about those business rules. So these things may be down to things like line items, but also we've got things like header charges, discounts, etc. As much as those rules you have, this is where we have that ability to stop documents and get suppliers involved in that process. And just to sort of complete the picture so you understand what some of the benefits it is for a supplier being on the network. The supplier is now getting that same view of documents that we had. So if you remember, we were the buyer, we could see one side. This is the supplier's side as well, seeing these documents. So I can see something's overdue, something's been paid, something's been sent. And really sort of some of the benefits of once we're into Tradeshift as a product, as both sides of the being involved, is now I can contact my buyer. I've already chased them once. I'm going to chase them again because I want my money. And this means we now have the ability to talk, communicate real time between buyer and supplier, collaborate. And really, we've taken advantage of that legislation that's coming in. We've not just sat back and said, okay, this legislation's coming in. How do we adhere to it? We've now made real advantage of that. And just to complete the journey as we go back, we'll also now see that, remember we had those suppliers before, this is what that supplier would see as an invite to say, do you want to join Tradeshift? And again, this goes on and on and on. So what we're talking about is, if we go back to what we've seen and try and put it into some context, suppliers can send in UBL messages. They could also send in a Zugver PDF. It's a similar process in terms of that. Those documents, we identify who the supplier is. If it's the first time it's an invoice, we invite them to the network so we can get that additional business value. But then invoice content is also validated to make sure it meets your business rules. And then we have the ability to do that supplier enrichment if we need to. So key things for me is, yes, these mandates are coming in, but it's really, and mentioned I've been in this space for quite a few years, this is a really good opportunity to massively digitize your invoice flows. It's been something people have been working on for a long, long time. So it's a great thing to do. But it's these little things of having that experience to making sure that when you do implement it, it's efficient as possible. And by getting those suppliers interacting on the same network, that's where you create a lot of win-win scenarios where buyers are getting automated documents into their system, suppliers are getting that brilliant visibility, the ability to communicate direct, and also the fact that, you know, if there are errors, people know about them up front. So that whole process there of the duplicate invoice, that happens pretty instantly, not on day 30 when you're going, why I haven't been paid and I'm chasing up an overdue invoice. So it just helps speed up everyone's whole process. And yeah, there's just a summary on that invoice onboarding flow. So hopefully that really brought it to life. Just as some examples, just so you can see how those documents automatically flow through the system. I think it's important we sort of bring that back into how Tradeshift see compliance and how it fits into the bigger picture of Tradeshift as a company. So Tradeshift, if you look at its very core, with our founders, you know, they were involved in Nemhandle, which was peer-to-peer network. And really, since 2010, Tradeshift's been sort of at the core of this. We talk about UBL as a global standard. Just for a reference point, Tradeshift runs UBL documents. That's our core format. So really, you know, we have the expertise. This is really the area that we focus on a lot. And the platform's been designed for this world that we're moving to. We're what we call networked first, and we're a digital first platform. We're not a legacy platform, though, where we're having to adapt to these changes. And I may have mentioned on the supplier sending point, we actually have Babelway, which is our own middleware. And what a middleware means is we can translate any document language into another language. And because that sits around Tradeshift, that allows us to not only connect with any kind of other message format or business, but also it gives us the ability to make those changes, which they will happen, inevitably happen. It allows us to make those changes quickly and seamlessly. And if we think about that, probably the proof is in the pudding. So we're talking to you today about Germany, which is coming up. I've given you a demo of how it will work in Germany. But also, you know, we've got things coming in Romania, we've got Malaysia, we're involved, we're talking to the governments all the time as testing. And as Karina mentioned before, for France, we are one of the PDP providers, and we're very accelerated doing that as a process as well for when that mandate comes in. But if we look at it today, what we do today is in 71 countries, we offer e-invoicing. And again, that's checking that data is in the right format, it's got the right information in. We're working on these new mandates coming in, but also right now we can support in China e-FAPIALs connecting to the golden tax system as well. So we've got some good examples of customers doing that as well. And we are a global network. So we are trading all over the world, and really, if you look at our customers, you can see that how they have used us to become that global network to basically trade all across the world. And if we think about these customers, here's some really good examples that just like to call out. So I mentioned China. I'd go and have a look at Schaeffler, did a really nice case study on China. I think they're a great company of what they're doing there. If you search on YouTube for DHL, there's a nice video there that I think brings things to life. And then I've got Air France KLM there, and Air France, for example, are going to be one of our customers, being right at the forefront of piloting PDP. And yes, we've got lots of big numbers here, but I think the one that always grabs my attention the most is generally we see, in terms of connections, we may have something like 30,000 connections a month. So we're a network. So remember that we brought that supplier onto the Tradeshift network. That supplier could become a buyer and receive their invoices, but also they could connect to multiple buyers as well, and likewise. So we really get that social network element effect where once you join Tradeshift, there's that real benefit of being able to get access to more buyers, and buyers get more access to more suppliers. And remember, you can be both of those parties because people buy and sell stuff. And talking of buying and selling stuff and this whole process, last week, Tradeshift very excitingly had an announcement that we are part of a joint venture with HSBC in a company that's just been formed called Semfi. And if you sort of take a step back and think about it, Tradeshift, the world's largest trading network, HSBC is the world's largest bank in terms of business trading bank. And really, if we even just focused in on Germany, what I was showing you on the screen, that whole process can happen, in 2 to 3 days now. It's something that the whole payment AP process has been massively sped up. And really what Semfi is going to give the ability to do is having that finance process embedded in that process. So yes, traditional, there's been financing programs in the past, but they're not embedded into a platform, a process that's happening digitally with all of those insights. So there's a lot of exciting things coming along for Semfi. So again, I've done a few call to actions, but a quick Google of Semfi and see some of the press releases, I think is a really exciting thing to do. So that's enough of me. I'm going to hand back over to Karina, who's going to help summarize just what we've shown you.
Thank you, Sam. That was very detailed and super helpful. I would like to take this couple of minutes that we have left to do a quick summary about how we support our clients during this transition to the new mandate in Germany. So for buyers, we will support you with all the technical setup to make sure that you're fully ready by the time the mandate starts. You will have the peace of mind that you know that we will support you with any regulatory changes. We will help you with any internal adjustments, and we will make sure that we have extensive end-to-end testing and validation to make sure that the system is full and ready by January 2025. For sellers, we have the first invoice onboarding that Sam kindly showed us before, and that will make sure that the onboarding process is smooth and easy. They will also have the opportunity to enrich documents, so if any information needs to be added or changed, and also the possibility to use our platform for outbound documents, expanding the reach to buyers beyond our network. I hope you found this helpful, and now we're back to Joanna.
Okay, Karina and Sam, thank you for all the information you have shared with us during the presentation. It's clear that e-invoicing mandates are the topic of the year and are expanding throughout Europe. For Germany specifically, the deadline is approaching fast, so indeed the businesses need to act now. But luckily for our clients and all the people joining the webinar today, we have a solution ready to be implemented. And I can see that we had some questions coming in during the presentation. But before that, our new Vice President of Customer Success, Sarah Hall, would like to say a few words. Sarah?
Thank you, Johanna. Thank you very much for everyone that's joined today. I'm really excited to showcase the investment we've made in enabling capabilities for the German market. If this is something that you're interested in discussing more, please do feel to reach out directly to your customer success manager. They're there to help you and support you in terms of accessing this investment and the solution. I'd also like to echo the sentiment that it is a really exciting time for me to have joined the business. The JV with HSBC really starts to build out our capability into the market, and it's a very exciting time as we build and grow the Tradeshift vision and strategy. I'm delighted to be here in the business. I joined from a background of having led out customer success strategies across a number of scale-up and larger, more mature operations in B2B SaaS. I'm here very much to understand what's working well for our customers, what's not working well for our customers, and really look to deliver best-in-class customer success experience. If anyone on this call would like to spend some time with me personally, sharing some feedback on how you find our products and services, please do feel reach out to your customer success manager, and they will put some time in with me personally. I have an open door policy to all our customers, and I very much want to hear how we can deliver the best experience for you. I'll hand back to you now. Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you, Sarah. So back to the questions, and I would like to start with this one. If issuing invoices will still be voluntary in January 2025, how can we ensure we will receive e-invoices and in the mentioned format, mandated format, sorry. Is this something we should be worried about, or we just need to be ready to receive them but that date? Karina, do you want to take this one?
Sure, thanks. Well, assuming that you're based in Germany, if your local supplier wants to send you an e-invoice compliant with the European mandate from January next year, you should be technically ready to receive it. And I think that's why it's so important to choose a partner that is leading in compliance to help you be ready for that moment.
Thank you, Karina. Now the second question is, what happens if we receive an e-invoice in another format than the two mentioned ones you talked about during the webinar? Sam, I think this one is for you.
Okay, yeah, I can take that. Yeah, so I think obviously we've mentioned the timeline is important when you receive that document. So there is, and we're talking about, January next year, which is only just around the corner. So obviously in the future, you will have the ability that if someone said something is a wildly wrong format, that you wouldn't accept that document. But also I think even now, I think we're in a period where we should be pushing for people to send documents in the right format. It's kind of, we're at the right time and the right place to start saying to people, no, we want you to send a UBL document in, which we were talking about on those formats. So an XLECOM as an example. So I think even though there is some freedom, if you look at the legislation, the way it tightens up and, still that 2028, no PDFs, which I know has caught a lot of people's attention. Yes, I think it's important that documents in the wrong formats can be stopped, but even if the legislation would allow it, I would still use this as the chance in your business process to start saying, no, we need to start accepting that format. And it is in your control to do that.
Okay, and finally, the last question, which would be again for you, Sam.
Oh, okay.
How do we deal with missing or incomplete information on an invoice?
Oh, cool. Well, I think hopefully it came across in terms of we have the business firewall. So that gives us the opportunity to really get suppliers involved in that process. And in the example, we saw a duplicate invoice, but likewise, that could have been missing business information, like you just said, Johanna. But again, we've got the technology side of things to stop it and then go to a supplier and ask them to enrich it. And even if they're not on the Tradeshift network, we can use that as a way of notifying them that there's something wrong. But also, I think this is an opportunity for you to work with your supplier for them to understand what that information is that's wrong. Suppliers don't want to go and correct an invoice every time, and they're going to start feeling your pain for when they put that information in wrong. So it's then about, as we showed in the platform, collaborating, working together. That means actually they're sending those good invoices in without that missing information. So that could be, delivery charges, PO details, names, emails, anything really.
Thank you, Sam. I can see that some of the questions were also already answered in the chat during the presentation. So thank you very much for that, Iko and Chris. There are also some more questions that need a more in-depth explanation, but someone from our team will reach out to you after the webinar and make sure to answer all of them. Before we go, I would also like to remind you that you can stay updated on compliance topics by following our blog, which you will find on tradeshift.com. And if you already are a client, you could reach out to your local customer success manager, as already previously mentioned by Sarah, to start implementing the solution for Germany. And if you are not a client, our sales team is reachable at sales@tradeshift.com. For additional questions that you might have related to the Germany mandate or also other compliance topics. Also, the last friendly reminder, please take a minute to fill in the questionnaire that will pop up once we close the webinar. Yeah, and that was it. Thank you very much all for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you on our next webinars.
Thank you for everybody's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.